Oh, hello, great readers. I'm Belchan.
I'm Nimakong.
I'm Banchan.
In this class, I'll read to all of you a part of Great Expectations.
As.
Ah.
Great Expectations. Charles Dickens. To 16. With my head full of George Barnwell. They took upon my sister, or at all events that as her new relation, popularly known to be under obligations to her. I was a more legitimate object of suspicion than anyone else. But when, in the clear light of next morning, I took another view of the case, which was more reasonable. Joe had been at the Three Jolly Bargemen, smoking his pipe, from 8:15 to 10:15. While he was there, my sister had been seen standing at the kitchen door, and had exchanged good night with a farm labourer going home. He got into dense confusion when he tried to be. Then that it must have been before 9. When Joe went home at 5 minutes before 10, he found her struck down on the floor and promptly called in assistance. The fire had not then burnt unusually low, nor was the snuff of the candle very long. The candle, however, had been blown out. Nothing had been taken away from any part of the house. Neither my sister, disarrangement of the kitchen, excepting such as she herself had made, in filling and bleeding. But there was one remarkable piece of evidence on the spot. She had been struck with something blunt and heavy on the head and spine after the blows were dealt. Something heavy had been thrown down at her with considerable violence, as she lay on her face, and on the ground beside her, when Joe picked her up, was a convex leg iron which had been filed asunder. And Joe, examining this iron with a smith's eye, declared it to have been filed asunder some time ago. The hue and cry going off to the hulks, and people coming thence to examine the iron. Joe's opinion was corroborated. Undoubtedly had once belonged by either of the two convicts who had escaped last night. For though one of those two was already retaken, and had not freed himself of his iron, knowing what I knew, I set up an inference of my own hair, him filing that latest use, for I believe of two other persons to have become possessed of it, and to have turned it to this cruel account. Orlick, or the strange man who had shown me the file. Then, asked Orlick, at the turnpike. He had been seen about town all the evening. He had been in divers companies in several public houses, and he had come back with myself and Mr. Wapple. There is nothing against him, save a quarrel, and my sister had quarrelled with him, and with everybody else about her, 10,000 times. As to this strange man, about them, because my sister was fully prepared to restore them. Besides, there had been no altercation. The assailant had come in so silently and suddenly that she had been felled before she could look round. It was horrible to think that I had provided the weapon, however undesignedly, but I could hardly think otherwise. That spell of my childhood told Joe all the story. For months afterwards, I every day settled the question finally in the negative, and reopened and read it next morning. The contention came. After all, if this secret was such an old one now, had so grown into me and become a part of myself, that I could not tear it away. In addition to the dread that, having led up to so much mischief, believed it, I had a further restraining dread that he would not believe it, but would assort it with the fabulous dugs and veal cutlets as a monstrous invention. However, I temporized with myself. Of Lucifer, was I not wavering between right and wrong? The assailant, the constables and the Bow Street men from London Fair. We court too. But there's such cases. They took up several obviously were people, and they ran their heads very hard against their own ideas, and persisted in trying to fit the circumstances to the ideas, instead of trying to extract ideas from the circumstances. Also, they stood about the door of the Jolly Bargeman, with knowing and reserved look that filled the whole neighbourhood with admiration, and they had a mysterious manner of taking their drink that was almost as good as taking the culprit, but not quite, for they never did it. Long after these constitutional powers had dispersed, my sister lay very ill in bed. Her sight was disturbed, so that she saw objects multiplied, and grasped at visionary teacups and wine glasses instead of the realities. Her hearing was greatly impaired, her memory also, and her speech was unintelligible. When, at last, she came round so far as to be helped downstairs, it was so necessary to keep my slate always by her, that she might indicate in writing what she could not indicate in speech, as she was very bad handwriting apart a more than indifferent speller, and as Joe was a more than indifferent reader. Extraordinary complications arose between them which I was always called in to solve. The administration of man instead of medicine, the substitution of tea for Joe, and the baker for bacon, were among the mildest of my own mistakes. However, her temper was greatly improved, and she was patient. Her regular state, and afterwards, at intervals of 2 or 3 months, she would often put her hands to her head. Mind, we were at a loss to find a suitable attendant for her, until a circumstance happened conveniently to relieve us. Wiste, Wopsle's great and conquered a confirmed habit of living in which she had fallen, and Biddy became a part of our establishment. It may have been about a month after my sister's reappearance in the kitchen. Worldly effects, and became a blessing to the household. Above all, she was a blessing to Joe, of his wife, and had been accustomed, while attending on her of an evening, to turn to me every now and then and say, with his blue eyes moistened, "Such a fine figure of a woman as she once were." From infancy, Joe became able in some sort to appreciate the greater quiet of his life. Did him good, proved although he never knew it, deepest spirits they had ever encountered. Biddy's first triumph in her new office was to solve a difficulty that had completely vanquished me. I had tried hard at it, but had made nothing of it. Thus it was, again and again and again. My sister had traced upon this slate a character that looked like a curious tea, particularly wanted. I had in vain tried everything producible that began with a T, from tart to toast and tub. At length it had come into my head that the sign looked like a hammer, and on my lustily calling that word in my sister's ear, she had begun to hammer on the table and had expressed a qualified assent. Thereupon, I had brought in all our hammers, one after another, but without avail. Then I bethought me of a crutch, the shape being much the same, and I borrowed one in the village, and displayed it to my sister with considerable confidence, but shook her head to that extent when she was shown it. When my sister found that Biddy was very quick to understand her, this mysterious sign reappeared on the slate. Biddy looked thoughtfully at it, heard my explanation, spoke thoughtfully at my sister, spoke thoughtfully at Joe, who was always represented on the slate by his initial letter, and ran into the fridge, followed by Joe and me. Why, of course, cried Biddy, with an exultant face. Daisy? Orlico. Without a doubt. She had lost his name, and could only signify him by his hammer. We told him why we wanted him to come into the kitchen, and he slowly laid down his hammer, wiped his brow with his arm, took another wipe at it with his apron, and came slouching out, with a curious loose vagabond bend in the knees that strongly distinguished him. I confess that I expected to see my sister denounce him, and that I was disappointed by the different result. She manifested the greatest anxiety to be on good terms with him, was evidently much pleased by his being at length produced, and motioned that she would have him given something to drink. Took kindly to his reception. She showed every possible desire to consolate him, and there was an air of humble propitiation in all she did, such as I have seen pervade the bearing of a child towards a hard master. After that day, a day rarely passed without her drawing the hammer on her slate, and without Ulrich slouching in and standing doggedly before her, as if he knew no more than I did what to make of it. To be continued.